Hi, everyone. I'm going to be presenting on some work that I've done with colleagues. And the first piece of work that we did together was a piece of research called "I'm Not Super Familiar with Children's Ecosystems Online, Expert Assessments on the Effects of Early Childhood Exposure to Extremism Online," as well as a RAN issue paper that came out last year. And so this is the research team that I have had the pleasure of being a part of. There's David and Ruxi based in Canada, as well as Jade, who sits in Australia. And so the background of our work came out of our interest in the shifting dynamics that we've been talking about with children. We particularly observed during and after the COVID-19 pandemic a growing use of children online, and also their presence in social media, online games, etc. And we sought to provide insights and recommendations moving forward as a result of those. And so what we did was the RAN issue paper that I mentioned earlier. We first started with a literature review, which covered topics such as use of digital media today, exposure generally to online extremism in children, the role of community figures, as well as the role of critical thinking and digital media. But then we decided to take it a step further and conducted 8 semi-structured interviews with practitioners and policymakers in the field, particularly who work more closely with children. And these frontline practitioners, they were mostly based in Australia, Canada, Germany, the UK, and the Netherlands. And we asked them questions about what they understood about children's online ecosystems. And also for the purposes of our study, we defined children as between the ages of 17 and 13 years old, because this is the time when children are developing significant social and cognitive advances, as well as begin to establish a sense of identity. And so for our key findings, particularly from the literature review, we had that there's the psychological appeal of extremist content, as I think many of us already know. It's enticing, particularly for boys. We have appealing figures such as Andrew Tate, as was mentioned earlier. We also discovered that misogynistic content is one pretty big entry point. And this is because influencers realize children need social approval. There's also the online gaming communities that are playing a large role. And I want to say that online games, this isn't really new. These have been around since at least the early 90s. However, there have been some shifts in the way they're presented. We have more advanced chat features, multiplayer modes, etc., making messaging and propaganda easier. And then, of course, there's, as a result of that, grooming that can also take place through games. And this grooming can be both strategic and organic. And then we also have other findings include gaps with parents and with educators and their knowledge gaps or ability to find solutions or to even know what to do. So parents and educators themselves largely lack digital literacy. And also we highlighted a need, or they highlighted a need for awareness programs for both groups to help with recognizing the signs of exposure. And we also found, of course, a need for cross-sectoral collaborations. So particularly among psychologists, education practitioners, people in the tech industry. And through that, we came up with some policy and practice recommendations based on the interviews that we conducted. So we recommend that, of course, we strengthen parental engagement and recognize the support that parents need, including tools, resources, but especially guidance as well. We also recommend more community-based capacities, so recognizing our local teachers, social workers, child-facing practitioners as our subject matter experts who really need to be central to these conversations as well. There's, of course, tech industry accountability. There have been some good developments in this area, including like more age verification features, a bit more algorithmic transparency, but we're sure that more can be done working with the tech industry. And then a big one is, addressing the gaps in the education sector. In particular, there is very little digital media training in teaching or in administrators' licensure programs. So perhaps taking a harder look at that, as well as building awareness around extremist recruitment. And then the last one, I don't know if it might be the most popular, but the idea that children's voices should also be included in these dialogues. The approaches that we come up with are often a bit top-down, but it's kids themselves who have the peers or who themselves are on these online platforms, and they also have ideas to add to these conversations. However, of course, there are sensitivities to the appropriateness of inviting children into these spaces. So, but something to think about. And so, in summary, as has already been highlighted, this is a complex issue. Solving it will need to be multifaceted. We know that this can no longer be an afterthought and that we need active engagement all around to protect children in digital spaces. What I would like to particularly emphasize, however, is the piece about further collaboration and how that's desperately needed between educators, practitioners, policymakers, social workers, and people in tech spaces. And then also, I'd like to highlight that ongoing research, it would be extremely helpful, but particularly as a practitioner myself, I would like to see more research around climate and culture in schools. So what I mean by that is there's a lot of conversation around what children need to learn. It's kind of this idea of what we do to children to get the behaviors that we want from them. But I encourage us to think about how can we work with children and start to shift the culture and climate that children experience in schools, that they experience in child-centered spaces. And how are they engaging? What are they learning? Are they engaged? Is there a sense of belonging in those spaces? And then I would also invite us to, since this research has highlighted that we're seeing changes with boys, I'd like to invite us as well to continue research in boys' education as well. So so this is where you can find me. I've got my email there, and also LinkedIn is a great place to keep in touch for me. So thank you very much.